captains, would you like to see more videos like these? What about more on-site coverage of special events and visits to Cryptic Studios? Then visit patreon.com/priority1 to find out how to become a monthly supporter of the show. Because without you, none of this would be possible.
Command codes verified.
And our next interview is with Phil, Gorngonzolla Zeleski, lead systems designer, and Jeremy, Borticus Randall. Thank you both for joining us here on Priority One Podcast.
You bet.
Happy to be here.
And Phil, we actually spoke not too long ago,
No.
but it's great to know that you have more content to discuss with us.
We do. There's a lot, and now there will be video, so that's great. So what I want to talk about is start showing you guys the ships, and you've probably seen a lot of screenshots or heard about them and maybe read the developer blogs, but you get to see them in action. So what I like to show off is just how cool looking these ships actually are, and their console abilities and their starship traits. I think they're all pretty fantastic. Anyway, so I'm going to move us so we're not attacked by some dumb NPC and demonstrate some of the cool stuff here. So all Tier 6 ships come with like you'd expect, a console, and they also come with a starship trait that you can that you would unlock. So here you're looking at the starship mastery progression path for this particular ship, for the Eclipse Intel cruiser. And the way the system works is that this particular ship is maxed out, so he's hit Tier 5. But the way this works is you start off at 0, and as you defeat enemies in space, you gain skill points, and skill points go to level up your starship mastery. When you gain enough, you gain a level.
It may be worth noting that with Delta Rising in the Delta Quadrant, we have increased the amount of skill points people get from kills in order to make up for systems like this. I know that when you're leveling up from 1 to 50, you sometimes kill something, get 1 skill point.
Right.
That's not going to happen in the Delta Quadrant.
Okay.
So Starship Mastery is you're getting a perk every time you level up your ship. For example, this is a cruiser. This is a battle cruiser kit for Starship Mastery. So this particular Starship Mastery kit has absorptive hull plating, which is kinetic and physical damage resistance on your hull, improved critical severity, damage resistance to radiation and all energy, 10% additional hit points, and then lastly, this ship's starship trait is battle ready. So what this trait does is every time you use an intel or engineering bridge officer ability, you gain a stacking bonus to your defense and damage resistance for a short time. So that's how that works.
And in case it already hasn't been made clear, anytime that you unlock a trait on any of these Tier 6 ships, you keep it. That becomes a part of your captain, and you can then equip it on any ship you're flying. So if you like battle ready, you don't necessarily have to keep flying the Eclipse to keep using battle ready. You can put it on any ship, just like Phil showed here.
And I wanted to ask, we discussed this a little bit in episode 191, and for those listeners that may not have listened to it, one of the things that I noticed is that these traits are enhance the strengths. And we talked a little bit about this. Why not enhance the, perhaps, weaknesses? Can you just remind us again why go in that direction, just briefly?
Absolutely. So one of the goals for this particular system was to make a given ship class stand out and do a particular thing better. So if we filled in weaknesses on ships, we might run into a situation where we're creating more homogeneous starships, so that the difference between an escort and a cruiser is less. And we wanted that to be more. So we wanted tactical ships to be more damagey, and we wanted the cruisers to be more tanky. So that was one way of going about doing that. And then there's the intel seats, which kind of throw everything for a loop, because now you could take a tanky ship and make it have a lot more utility. Right. So it's a lot more versatility on Tier 6 ships.
So every bridge officer, it's important to think of the new intelligence as a specialization. It's separate from your profession. So every bridge officer that is a hybrid bridge officer has both a profession and a specialization. So they might be a science officer and an intelligence officer, or a tactical officer and an intelligence officer. The seats on the ships work the exact same way. So if you have in this example is intelligence intelligence engineering station. That station can fit, any engineering officer can go in there and use their engineering powers. But if you put an engineering intelligence officer in there, then they have access to both power sets, whatever you've given them as their chosen skills. But you cannot put a tactical intelligence officer into that seat. They go in tactical intelligence seats instead.
And so, for example, this one intelligence bridge officer and row could have engineering team too.
Yep.
Yeah. In the officer that Phil's showing right now has all intelligence, but they can be any mix of their profession and their specialization.
You can choose any intel ability that
right.
you want.
One of the goals of the specialization system was to expand the options instead of making a whole new class that was supposed to be better or invalidate previous choices potentially. We just wanted to expand the choices that players could make. And so, if specializations, if intelligence is not your thing, you can just fit these tier 6 ships with all the existing powers. That's fine. That's cool.
Right. And I remember speaking, if not with you, Phil, with Al, that having these specializations or going this route offers more flexibility down the road with developing more bridge officers and more specializations down the path.
Since specializations are not a replacement for your existing profession, we can consider, in fact, we already are considering additional hybrids for the future.
Right. So intelligence may not be your thing now, but there might be a specialization down the road that you're going to enjoy.
Okay, so I'm going to show off. I'm flying the Eclipse Intel Cruiser right now, and I wanted to show off the console itself, which is the structural integrity siphon, field siphon. And what this power does is it'll deal damage over time to enemies within 5 kilometers, up to 5 enemies. And then what it'll do is grant you a static amount of temporary hit points plus a bonus for each target you hit. Okay, and if any of your targets have been rendered vulnerable by gather intel, the damage over time is going to have 100% shield penetration instead of 50%. So I'm going to go ahead and activate this console ability.
Ooh, pretty.
So this is kind of a visual language we use with Intel powers in general. So it's like data that's being streamed,
like code snippets.
Yeah.
The Matrix. Take a drink.
You'll notice that he's got extra hit points now. That temporary hit points are always they're higher in priority. Basically, when incoming damage is applied to you, it always takes from your temporary hit points prior to taking away from your hull.
And that lasts until
there's a duration or until that
it fills up.
It is taken. You should take that much damage. So I'm going to show you guys gather intel real quick and the way this mechanic works. So first off, you have a toggle power, not unlike sensor analysis. And using it on a target will launch a little drone from your ship onto the target, which is pretty neat. And then after enough stacks of a debuff have been built up on the target, you can use one of these 3 abilities. The first one here is Expose Vulnerability Defenses. It requires a target to be vulnerable, and it's going to remove any engineering bridge officer buffs on it. It's going to reduce their damage resistance rating, and it's going to increase the amount of damage they receive to their shields by an amount for the duration. And then the next one is Expose Vulnerability Weapon Systems, and this is going to remove any tactical bridge officer buffs, reduce damage, and reduce accuracy. And then lastly, we have Expose Vulnerability Critical Systems. This ability is going to remove all science bridge officer buffs, and it's going to hold the target for 5 seconds.
A hold makes them both unable to move and unable to act, so they're pretty much sitting ducks.
One interesting thing about these powers is that they stack with one another. The same instances of the power will stack. So say you're in a team of 5 intel ships. What will happen is if you all render a target vulnerable, all of you will have a window to act and use one of these abilities. You can stack the same effect on the target. So for example, if all of us in this room used Exposed Vulnerability Defense on the target, so instead of what we normally do in the game is we stack the effectiveness of the debuff, instead we're doing is we're stacking the duration. So it's theoretically possible in a group to keep these debuffs up the entire duration of the combat if you're doing it right. So it's a game balance point that if you have a team full of intel ships, you are going to be able to keep debuffs up on a target for a long period of time if you coordinate. So coordinating is pretty valuable. So I'll show you what this looks like. Here I'm going to go ahead and launch the sensor probe. So you can see.
It's a cloaking probe, so it occasionally pops out a cloak, scans.
Now the target's vulnerable, and I can use one of these abilities. So I just use exposed vulnerability defenses on it, and that's going to reduce make it basically more vulnerable to damage. As you can see here, there's an exposed vulnerability immunity debuff on the target, and what this means is no one can affect this target with they can't be rendered vulnerable for a period of time. So that's how that mechanic
actually
works.
ticks over pretty quick. As you can see, it's already back to vulnerable.
Right.
If you have multiple intel ships also using gather intel on the same target,
You do build up stacks of the debuff on the target more quickly.
so they become vulnerable more quickly.
If you have 5 people, the target's going to be vulnerable
If 5 people launch gather intel, it will
On the
become
same
more,
target.
it will on the same
very
target.
quickly,
The
5
stack
times
does
as quickly.
belong there.
Which again opens that window for the entire team.
Right.
So it
Right.
both opens it faster and allows the entire team to benefit from it.
But they all want to catch that window because otherwise they'll all be affected by the immunity also.
Correct.
You know, one thing I noticed, and it could be because I don't use sensor analysis, is that when I was testing it on Tribble, and this might have been in recent. I didn't notice. It took me a while to realize that I click it, and although it highlights white, it took me a little while to notice because in the heat of combat, it was a little difficult to see it. So players need to be aware that once that is on and highlighted white, it's active and it's doing its thing.
Right.
Yeah, it's a toggle. It's like
Right,
Cruiser
right,
Wars.
right.
Same thing.
Right.
And we're already examining the usability of it. If there's any way that we can figure out to increase it or improve it for player facing, we're absolutely open to feedback on that.
So I'm going to show you guys this ship's Starship trait. And the way this works is anytime you use an intel or a engineering ability, you gain a buff to defense and resistance. So I'm going to go ahead and just fire off engineering team. So I have gained battle ready. Basically, it puts effects on your ship that boost your defense, and you can stack that 3 times. I'm at max stacks here. Anyway, that's how that particular Bridge ability works. The Starfleet Intel ship traits are designed with synergy in mind, and I'll talk about that in a little bit too. So that's the Eclipse, and that's what the ship does. It's a pretty tanky Intel ship. It'll play like a battlecruiser. It's effectively what it is.
Oh man, you're telling me I need to switch out of my Avenger?
Yeah,
You will
well,
be tempted at least.
hopefully you're tempted. Hopefully you're tempted. Yeah, I hear you. That's
We have received some feedback about the visual aspects of these ships as well in the past. Just in case people didn't already know, you can choose different materials for it, including a very standard Federation kind of white-gray material. If you like the more traditional look, there are definitely options to outfit your fit.
And if you own all 3 of the pack, the actual Delta Rising Operations pack, you'll be able to swap out kit.
Yeah, there's a few
Okay,
pieces that are
yeah,
interchangeable. Yes, nacelles and a few other pieces like that.
So this ship is super nimble, and like the other, I didn't mention that the Eclipse also has cloak, which is pretty cool for a Starfleet ship and very uncommon. So this ship it's a light escort, so it has light hull, light shields, but it's really maneuverable. I think it can be compared to the tactical escort, like the Defiant. And this ship's console is the heavy phaser lance.
Right.
So this is a pretty versatile console. So you can either use it to render a target vulnerable in the same manner that Gather Intel does. So it takes a certain number of stacks to make a target vulnerable. Mm-hmm. This just, boom, makes them vulnerable. But the amount of damage it does, it's kind of medium-high. Mm-hmm. Alternative, so I'll show you that. So boom, big phaser shot, and the target is vulnerable. And a system is knocked off, 100% chance to knock a system offline. So that's cool, too. I just knocked the aux offline on that ship. So this power used to ignore shields, and it has since been tweaked. So the base damage was increased, and the shield penetration was removed from the base line of this, and reduced the shield penetration on the advanced version. So now I'm going to start building up stacks on this guy and render him vulnerable. Now if the target's vulnerable, this power gets upgraded to a piercing heavy phaser lance. So it does more damage and has 50% shield penetration. Zow. So that's what this console.
Almost twice as much damage.
Right.
Yeah. So pretty cool, I think. Pretty fun. And with enough damage consoles on your ship, you could seriously mess somebody up with that.
Right.
It does benefit from phasers, just like any other phaser weapon would.
Okay.
So something that it's going to be difficult to illustrate easily here, so I'll just describe it. This ship's starship trait is called reciprocity. And basically what it does is every time you are missed, you get there's a recharge time reduction on all your intel and tactical bridge officer abilities. So this ties in directly with the last trait, battle ready. So it increases the chance that you will be missed per stack, and then this gives you a benefit to that. So if you're zipping around and enemies are missing you, every few seconds you can be able to reduce the remaining cooldown times on your tactical.
Very nice.
Yeah. So starship traits are pretty cool.
And not only that, but the other one was triggered off of intel and, of course, engineering powers, whereas this one's cooling down your intel powers so that you can use them more often. Some folks have noticed there's several new items and abilities and traits in the game that are new approaches to getting reduced cooldown times.
Yeah, that's true. There's a few of those. We don't want to give out too much of that in the game because it can drastically change what we expect players to be able to do. So in some other cryptic games, we discovered that pretty quickly. So we're trying to not going too crazy with that, but we do like to sprinkle it here and there.
Well, and it's kind of honestly, it's come about as from some of our internal investigations into like Ox to Bat builds, the famous Ox to Bat builds. We can see what players are capable of doing with a build that already exists. So we do have a notion of what to compare it against. We also, that particular build was not exactly intended to work the way it is. The fact that players discovered it and were able to build extremely effective ships using it is really interesting to us just from a design standpoint because it wasn't exactly intended. But now we can start building on that, on what players have been able to achieve and what they wanted out of it, and give it to them in different ways.
Right. The infamous Ox to Bat.
So I've switched out ships here. Well, you might have noticed. This is the Scryer, so this is the science ship. It's a little different from most science ships because it can use cannons, but it doesn't have sensor analysis. That was given up so that you wouldn't end up like double toggles from gather intel and that sort of thing. And so it's not a true 100% science ship. It's an intel science ship, so it's a little different. So this ship has cloak, like you'd expect, and its starship trait is called emitter synergy. And what this does is, whenever you use a tactical or intel ability, all your shield heals and exotic damage abilities become stronger. The stacks up to 3 times. So you might be able to see a synergy that's going to occur because using battle ready is going to make you harder to hit, which is going to trigger reciprocity, right?
Which reduces your tactical cooldowns.
Your tactical and intel cooldowns, and this allows you this gives you a buff to shield heals, which I think everybody uses, and exotic damage abilities, which I think some people use, for every time you use an ability that you're already going to use. So it creates this positive game feedback loop. So I try to make these 3 traits synergize in a fun way. So this ship's console is called Deploy Sensor Probe Swarm. And this basically takes a slightly weaker version of all of the buffs and all of the exposed vulnerability powers and slaps it on everybody in a PB AoE around you. Everybody in 5 kilometers of you, or 5 enemies in 5 kilometers of you, is going to get a pretty serious debuff for a short time. And you might be able to see in red there, so foes that are rendered vulnerable by gather intel will be held for 6 seconds. So you actually do get the exposed vulnerability critical systems in there as well. So let me go ahead and demonstrate this power. It's pretty cool, but some of the effects are pretty subtle. So I'm going to adjust the camera angle here a little bit so I'm able to see it better. So I'm going to go ahead and deploy this. So all these little probes come out and start rushing your target, and you can see them harassing them there. So that's what it does for 15 seconds. And that's the Scryer. It's a pretty fun ship, I think. It being able to use cannons makes it pretty versatile. So that's it for the Starfleet Intel ships. I think we can take a look at some of the two other ships that are coming out. And we have the experimental science vessel, the Dauntless. And this ship is
Totally canon.
Yeah.
sort of.
It's funny to hear people argue both sides of it
Right,
against
yeah.
one another
Right,
because
right.
it appeared in the show, so it's canon, but it wasn't technically Starfleet, so it's not canon. But it whatever. You know what? It's a fun ship, and it is from the show, so we couldn't not include it in a Delta Quadrant expansion.
Okay, so this ship is a fairly traditional science ship, but it has more of a tactical bent to it. So it has 5 tactical seats, a lieutenant commander tactical and a lieutenant tactical. Oh, wow. So it's pretty offensive. We want to do something different.
Offensive, not offensive.
There are no ensigns on this ship.
Oh, there are no ensigns.
There you go.
Wow, yeah, no ensigns. They're all fired.
That's his pet, fire the ensigns.
Ah, yes.
So you'll see more of that because if you don't, you end up either with too many lieutenant commanders or 6 seats.
Right, because this is one of the 13 seat.
Right.
So we have the Starship trait on the experimental science vessel is the Radiant Nanite Cloud trait. And what this does is it causes any of your whole heal abilities to do a splash heal in 3-kilometer radius around your target for 25% of the healing done over 4 seconds. So this gives additional versatility for characters that like to focus on support. So that's a pretty nice tool. Now, its console's complete madness. I love it. It's pretty crazy. And at one time he made it even crazier and decided that's just too crazy. So it is intended to just wreak havoc on a group of enemies. So let's take a look at it right here. So it's called Particle Synthesizer, and what it is, it's a ranged AoE power, and it confuses enemies and has a half duration versus players.
Guaranteed.
What's that?
That's guaranteed. There's no. It will confuse when you hit him.
Well, confuse is a yes.
Yes.
So
Yeah, that's right.
It will confuse. It's not a chance to for a short time. And the enemies also have their turn rate significantly reduced, and your threat is significantly reduced. And you also create a photonic decoy of yourself. So this covers a lot of bases. It's supposed to be kind of an oh crap power and also a control power. So you're going to cause the enemies that are affected, that are confused, to have a good chance to attack each other. And if they decide to not attack each other, they decide that I'm not confused at this moment, they'll probably shoot your photonic decoy instead of you. So there's a survivability element to it as opposed to and the control. So I'll go ahead and show you what this looks like. You won't see them shooting at each other because they're not.
They don't have weapons.
They don't have weapons.
They're dummies.
So, but you can see them. And oh, by the way, they also take on the appearance of the Dauntless.
Oh, okay.
So it just confused everybody. And then there's your photonic decoy just zipping around. So and then it wore off. So that's
now
how that works.
the costume swap might be worth noting doesn't work with all critters. Things that are too big or that would look too strange to change, like you can't change a transwarp gate into a Dauntless. The rest of the effects of the power should still take effect. It's just not the visual component.
I'm just imagining the Benny Hill effect on the spheres in Infected Space Elite.
Yeah.
They hit emergency powered engines, then can't turn, all start shooting at each other, and just fly off in all different directions.
Yeah, that'll probably happen. So a couple things to know. This is a traditional science vessel. So it does have a secondary deflector. And yes, there will be secondary deflectors, and it's planned. So we're definitely working on that. We know everybody wants that. So it also has sensor analysis and subsystem targeting. So it's a pretty standard science vessel, but it has more of a tactical bent.
It also does have an Intel seat. The Lieutenant Science is a hybrid.
So this seat here is Intel Science. So
The tactical seating is on par with, I think, the Vesta. That's pretty.
it's a beast.
Pretty heavy tactical.
So here is I'm showing you now the Guardian cruiser. So this ship has more of a traditional look to it.
In many different ways. This was a fan favorite for a long time when we first started releasing concept art for it even.
I am one of those fans.
So, I mean, you'll see a lot of elements here from different
kind of an
stuff like
Odyssey-esque
cruisers.
saucer and the Excelsior neck. And, Yeah. Modern take on traditional values.
So let's talk about this ship. So it is a traditional cruiser. It's a straight-up cruiser, not a battle cruiser, not an intel cruiser, not a dreadnought cruiser, not a flight deck cruiser. What other kind of cruisers are there? It's none of those. it's just a cruiser. So
Not a destroyer, not a warship.
no, none of that. So it has all four of the cruiser auras, the command auras here. It has 8 weapons, and it's pretty standard, pretty straightforward. What is this? So its console here is called the particle conversion matrix. Unfortunately, I can't demonstrate this easily with 3 dummies who aren't shooting me, but let me tell you how cool this is. So take my word for it. So what it does is it makes damage incoming to your shields significantly reduced, which is really nice on its own. But it also, every time incoming damage, you're hit by damage, you get a stacking buff for 10% energy and 10% exotic damage. Stacks up to 10 times. Now you might think, holy cow, it's 100% extra damage, but it works in the same way consoles do. So it's
It's not the bonus.
It's not the bonus damage.
It goes on top of everything else, but it's kind of built into the core power of the ability.
So you will notice your damage increasing, but it's not double. So
Increases the base damage.
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And now, how long do the stacks last on that?
20 seconds should be. So let's fire this off. So now, while this is up, people who hit me are going to be sad when I shoot them back. So that's what this does. Pretty fun console. Both. I'm trying to make these consoles both pretty versatile. So they have an offensive component and a defensive component. So that's what that does. And as far as the ship's trait,
I love this trait.
desperate repairs. So this would be great in PvP.
Yes.
It's useful. It's certainly useful in PvE content because being critically hit really sucks. But in PvP, where the enemies are doing that all the time, this is going to help with that. So when you get critically hit, you get a counter. When you have 3 counters, you get a big hull heal and shield heal. So it's pretty nice.
This is like a baby miracle worker
that
procs off.
Yeah, and it's automatic.
Yeah.
So you don't have to even think about it. So that's what this does. And I'm going to hop to a different map so I can show you Starship upgrades going from the process from Tier 5 to Tier 5 T5U.
These traits, now seeing them live on the screen, I'm thinking to myself, okay, now I'm going to want to level up these ships a little bit and get a hold of these traits.
Yeah, seeing the
mastery
synergy
traits,
between them.
Right. Because that was my concern originally, was that, okay, I typically fly the escort. Am I really going to want to invest the time in getting into all these ships and leveling them up through their mastery trait? And it looks like it's going to be worth it. I mean, it's certainly something.
And it should be noted that it's not an enormous time investment for this. We're not asking you to grind for 6 months for a single trait or anything like that.
The intent is that it's 10 to 15 hours of active gameplay, while you're playing, right? So if you're in the ship for that long, you should be, level 5. But people play different ways. So there's going to be ways you can do it way faster than that. And there's going to be, if you're running content that's on the ground, well, you're not killing stuff in your ship, so you're not getting experience. So
there's no way for us to give you ship mastery experience when you're not in your ship.
Right.
So if that's your goal, that's your content.
So let's talk about upgrading a ship from Tier 5 to Tier 5.
There you go. There's your Avenger.
So here's the fleet battlecruiser, the Avenger, and
The UI is different. Yep.
yes, I don't know if this is what's been on Tribble. So
I think it's been updated since you did it.
So there are now 3 tabs down here instead of the one just showing tabs. You can also see that there's now these. It's
Slight improvement.
Yeah, it's a slight
We're in the
improvement.
process of trying to figure out what exactly we might want to trim or add to this setting, by the way. But now that we've relayed it out, we can start working on what's there.
And now we also notice we have loadouts here. So let's talk about upgrading. So when you upgrade a ship, it generally is going to cost a Starship requisition. Upgrade to requisition, I should say. And these are available on the C-Store.
And are tradable.
And are tradable, yeah. So we hit go ahead and hit the upgrade button. If you don't have a token, it's going to take you to the store to buy one. If you do have one, it's just going to open up this screen and tell you all the wonderful stuff you're going to get. So the USS Fuso here is going to go from 41,250 hit points to consist per level 60 to 55,000. So it's a pretty substantial boost.
And even at level 50, if a player on day one of Delta Rising upgrades a ship, they will see a hit point increase.
Yeah. So this is level 50 right here. So 47,437.5 hit points.
Thank you, rounding errors.
Yes. That's weird, but
it's about a 15% increase right off the bat.
Exactly. That's exactly how much it is. It's 15 and 33.3% at level 40 or 60. The other 40. And then also when you upgrade a starship, you get an additional console slot. This one, because it is a cruiser, gets a 5th engineering console slot. And then because it's a Tier 5 upgraded ship, you get Starship Mastery. So this gets a battlecruiser Starship Mastery
So
kit.
like what we saw in the Eclipse.
Exactly. So now I'm going to hit the complete upgrade button. Boom! It is now a Fleet Battlecruiser T5U. So you can
this demonstration didn't show, but if you upgrade a ship with equipment equipped, it is automatically moved over to your new ship.
So and there's that. And it should be noted that ships that were obtained through our seasonal events and obtained through lockboxes, low buy, that sort of thing, those ships are free to upgrade. So you'll see here, just says free upgrade. We hit this button, complete free upgrade. It gets the big burly.
But nobody will do that because who wants free stuff?
Right.
I think they've been using Intel powers on us, Elijah, because they upgraded your ship and then my ship.
Okay, so I'm going to hop over onto start showing you. What do you guys want to see? Romulan ships or Klingon ships next?
Klingons, please.
Klingons.
What I know that there was some triple testing done with these new ships. What have you been seeing from feedback regarding the Tier 6 ships, the new ones, the Intel ships, and what changes, if any, have been made?
So we found some. They didn't get a ton of feedback on these ships, unfortunately.
Which is sometimes concerning, because
Right.
can we interpret that to mean that we hit it nail on the head and nobody has any complaints,
Right.
or is it just too subtle?
So yeah, some of the feedback we got was largely fixing bugs, which was really helpful. We discovered some of the language used in the gather intel mechanic was a little weird, and since it wasn't showing the number of stacks that you had that were building up on the target, and the way that worked behind the scenes, it was kind of goofy. So I got that working, so it's much more clear. So that was some of the feedback we got on the particular.
There was a lot of feedback that we received that gave us fixing visual bugs with the ships. Sometimes the window options didn't work, stuff like that. We got some good feedback on the space intel powers from our internal testers, and we look forward to seeing more players using those powers and mixing them in with different builds to make sure, like kinetic magnet, for example, is one of my favorite space intel powers, and not because of what it does, but because of the options it presents for other things to do. And a lot of the Intel powers we built with that in mind, so really anxious to see how players break them.
So this is the Keeb Intel Battlecruiser. It's a light battlecruiser, so it has a lighter hull and same shields as you would expect from a battlecruiser. But it has a battle cloak, so it can cloak in the middle of battle, and it's also more agile, so it can turn more quickly and it's a little bit faster. So let's talk about this ship's starship trait and its console. So this is kind of the opposite of the Eclipse's console. So instead of getting 10 per hit points, this drains damage, reduces the damage of nearby enemies, and reduces their accuracy and gives it to you. So you get a flat amount of bonus damage plus a small amount of additional damage per target hit. Same thing with accuracy. So we'll go ahead and fire this off.
How very Klingon.
Right. that's what that looks like. Giving you damage. It's Starship Trait. I think this is probably one of my favorites. I really like this one. Its Starship Trait is called Advanced Firing Solutions. And what this does is every time you fire a cannon, you gain +1 turn rate and a small amount of accuracy. So,
now keep in mind that you can have. Does that include turrets?
yes.
I believe it does. So, up to 8 weapons on a ship firing your cannons.
So you can very quickly build up stacks. The idea of this is that you can put this on, if you wanted to, you can put this on a big bulky ship, kind of like the Bortascu.
Or even like a dreadnought carrier, like a Jimitar carrier or something like that.
And if you're shooting your little turrets, they're going to allow you to swing around more easily to bring your cannons to bear. So I think it's going to make cannons on big, slow ships more viable. That's definitely part of the intent.
Get that Bortascu auto cannon on.
Right.
I may start playing my Klingon war.
So
that's right, Klingon only starship trait right here.
This is a Klingon only trait. So let's show you what that looks like. And so I'm going to show you what my turn rate looks like right now. Kind of slow. It's pretty good for a battle cruiser, but kind of slow. So I'm going to go ahead and just start shooting. So I'm building up stacks. I've got 4. And now 8.
6, 7, 8.
Whee!
That you just saw was a neutronic torpedo from the Delta Rep.
So now I'm dancing. And then I can go ahead and activate my turn aura, and now I'm almost an escort.
And that's without any RCS consoles on board?
This is no consoles. This is just base. So.
As a mostly dreadnought player, this is silly to watch for me.
So that's this ship. I really like how it turned out, and you'll see these little afterburners in the background in the back here while this is on.
Nice animation.
So let's take a look at the next ship.
You're going to need a Pharazon.
I'm sorry, it'll stack up to 10 times, you said.
You're going to need a Pharazon. Klingon cat.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and take off this special shield costume I've got here. Oop, there we go. So I'm in the Matha Raptor right now, and it's a 5-2 ship. So we've got 5 forward weapons.
And 5
2
TAC
aft
consoles.
weapons. And 5 TAC consoles. So
that's the first KDF native ship with 5 forward weapons, is that right?
Well, there's the Moog. It's the first Raptor, first tactical commander seat ship with it, right?
Analog to the Avenger.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the trait and console here. So I'll show you the console last because it's pretty fun. I really like it. So the starship trait on this guy is called Overwhelming Force. And what it does is it causes your high-yield torpedoes to basically trigger a shock wave. So let's go ahead and... So you get basically a photonic shock wave with your high-yield torpedoes.
It's a slightly reduced version, but it's still pretty
reduced
impressive.
Radius, reduced damage, and you're not going to see all of the effects here, but let me see if I can get here we go. So now it also takes beam overload. Does a charged particle burst. No, it's not showing there, but it does do a charged particle burst on all enemies nearby. That's weird. If they don't take this at the latest build, this was fixed recently. It's probably the latest build. So that's what that does. Now the console is the heavy disruptor spinal cannons, and this is a fun console. So it is kind of like a lance. And it basically is a space machine gun. So I'm going to show you how this works. It shoots at everything in front of you. So if I move, it just keeps shooting in front of me. So I'm going to go ahead and recharge it and fire it again.
Because we can cheat. It also reduces the flight speed of anything it hits.
It shuts off their engines.
So it shuts off their engines, making it easier for you to stay on target.
So
that's disgusting.
So you can shred a group, of enemies with space machine guns
in the best possible way.
So that's the Matha.
Wow,
pretty cool.
And all of these ships again are available through the Delta Operations Pack.
Right.
Yes.
So, and they will also be, just so it's clear, they'll also available to be purchased individually if you want to do that. If you only want to get a couple ships or whatever, you can do that too.
Actually, I'm sorry. The console, it'll shoot your cannon type.
No,
it's disruptors.
It's a disruptor.
It's a disruptor, yeah.
So it will be, and that will also be affected by any of the consoles.
Yeah, if you're using disruptor consoles, it will improve its damage.
Good question here. So I'm going to switch over to Romulans here so I can show you that.
So while we're talking about starships and starships traits, there was some concerns raised early on that because Klingons and Romulans get fewer ships, that they might not be getting a full complement of traits available to them. So in case players didn't already know, you will be able to unlock additional starship traits through the specialization system. There's one for each of the intelligence, commando, and pilot. And even though commando is a ground-only specialization, it does offer a starship trait for you. So there are additional options that you can earn through other gameplay.
So
And that's just at launch. We may be adding others in other ways in the future. We don't want to limit players' choices too much. And we gave you 4 slots for starship traits for a reason.
Okay, so I am in the Alal Warbird Battlecruiser, and so let's talk about this ship's trait. It has the ability Warp Shadow Decoy. So if any of you guys are familiar with the Warp Shadow ability, it's a huge lifesaver. It can effectively absorb an infinite amount of damage. So unlike Quantum Absorption, which only has a very finite amount of damage you can absorb, that's because the decoys are invincible. So what this does is whenever you cloak, you create a decoy of you that will taunt nearby enemies. So you can slip away.
Kind of like those annoying Voth.
Yeah, pretty much. So there's my Warp Shadow. So that's how that works, and there's a cooldown on that. So you can use it once every 30 seconds. So that's its starship trait, and this ship's console is the destabilized singularity projector.
Now that the trait can be moved to other ships whenever you put it on whatever ship it is. It will create a duplicate of your ship.
Wow.
It's not just always an LL.
And how long does the duplicate last? I saw it didn't despawn when you decloaked.
Oh, it's 15 seconds, I believe. And I'll show you this console. So,
I like the open structure. I hadn't got a good 3D view of this one before.
It's kind of like a mini Daenerys.
Kind of a cross between a Daenerys and a Mogai in some ways.
Yeah, and it's pretty unique looking. And I'm using a costume variant here, so this isn't the standard costume. So we've got the Singularity Collapse. What this does is it reduces the target's damage resistance to exotic damage. So Science Powers will do more damage here. It's going to pull enemies toward your selected target, and it's going to cause kinetic damage over time. So let me go ahead and show what this looks like here.
What?
So, and as the targets are being crushed by the gravitational forces, you can see these small explosions on them.
Right.
That'll be good for conduit when you want to get the spheres.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
So you can imagine some of the synergy that you can rack up with Gravity
Well and
yeah. Or the Singularity Bomb console that you can get on the projected singularities.
Mm-hmm.
So, and now we're taking a look at the Fate Intel Warbird. So, much like the Light Warbird, the Light Warbird retrofit, this has Battle Cloak, or Enhanced Battle Cloak. So you can shoot torpedoes and mines while you're cloaked. It will briefly decloak you. And much like the Heavy Phaser Lance on the Phantom, this works pretty identically of the Heavy Plasma Lance.
Except that instead of knocking something offline, it just guarantees the plasma burn.
Mm-hmm. And you can see there, it created my Warp Shadow copy of you when I came out of cloak. There it goes. And now, if I build up stacks of gather intel on my target, this will get upgraded to a piercing heavy plasma lance, which will again penetrate shields a bit and increases the damage over time and the base damage of the power. So I think that's all we have time for today, unfortunately. I was really hoping to talk about more stuff. There's a lot of ships to cover and some new mechanics.
And that's more reason to have you on the show again in the coming weeks or months and talk more and more about ships. So thank you so very much, Jeremy and Phil. Thank you very much for spending time out of the busy schedule with Delta Rising coming out to talk with us about these ships and giving people more reason to buy that Delta Operations pack, right? It's a great value. It's a great value for that pack. So it's been great. Thank you again. This has been a wonderful presentation. People are going to eat this up. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.